So thank you very much for joining this session on privacy preserving AI discovery platform. We're very happy to be part of the Biome Journey launch today. Thanks to our host, Christian, Don, Michel, and Mila, and the support of Yoshua Bengio in Imagia's mission. I will tell you a short secret before we start the presentation. Before Mila was actually named Mila, it was named Lisa. So I'm very happy today to co-host you with my colleague, Lisa DiGiorio. She's the director of AI research, and in our team, we call it Open Innovation. So I'm Alexandre Leboutillier. I'm the co-founder and CCO of Imagia. And today we're going to discuss about how can we apply different AI techniques to really do those discovery in an ethical way while maintaining IP protection. So at the end of this presentation, you'll learn 3 key principles that we're going to apply by design in this discovery platform. And we'll have the chance of having key panelists to discuss the potential application of artificial intelligence. Those panelists have been selected very carefully. Typically, they do keynotes in events. So we feel very honored to have them. I'm going to present them at the end of the presentation, but really thank them for your time in this precious day. As you know, the healthcare data have really exploded in the last 7 years, and the trend is not stopping. We have IoT, we have more and more devices that produce data on a daily basis. With all those data, you could imagine that we would be better, but still there's a lot of way to go to reduce the rate of misdiagnosed cases. And also we are very far from having response to treatment that are reaching 100%. So we really want to improve the patient journey, because in high burden disease, the clock is always ticking. Artificial intelligence have made a lot of progress, and I'm going to show you a very interesting image, and I really want to have your input on that image. Some people will say, this looks like a medical image. This looks like a CT image. But in fact, this is not a medical image. This was computer-generated image, a computer dream in a sense. We train an AI model with a lot of normal CT scan, and we extracted imaging feature using a type of adversarial network to represent what is normality. So this is really a synthetic data, so that serves that purpose, but also it serves us to better understand what is normality. So you can extract data from high volumes of, you can extract insights from high volumes of data and produce some interesting synthetic data. Essentially, what we want to do from a digital discovery perspective is really accelerate the healthcare innovation. And how do we want to do that is first by the data. If you ask Yoshua, if you ask every AI scientist, you want more data. So you want to make sure that you have access to the right data in the right quantity with the right metadata information. And we'll discuss that later. You want to get artificial intelligence insight in an easy way, in an autonomous way. And you want to also expand on collaboration, because you don't want just to work on your data set. Otherwise, you'll end up with a discovery that is biased. And this is a very important concept in artificial intelligence. We want to discover those links between the data that can help treatment optimization, that can help response prediction, and can build clinical decision support system. And all those digital discovery will really transform the digital medicine as we know, and will be brought to life to patients by industry leaders such as Novartis. As you know, there are many problems in applying AI, but also AI can be a solution by itself. So we know we have data in silo. It's difficult to get insights from all those data. We have network privacy issue. More and more, it's very present. We have PPEDA law in Canada. We have GDPR. We have HIPAA. We want to make sure that we respect privacy of data. And you want to make sure that whatever digital solution you come up with will really reach clinical adoption because you want to reach patients. So those different problems can be seen as a challenge, but could also be seen as an opportunity to help and apply artificial intelligence to gather the data, to get more insight. We'll discuss today how we can solve partially the network privacy issue. And if we can empower the clinicians to build their own solution, we'll get better chance at clinical adoption. So I'm going to refer to the Montreal Declaration of Responsible AI, which is one of the most sought of declaration in the world by MIT. They did an extensive review of multiple declarations, and this declaration essentially has 10 principles. I'm going to focus on 3 key principles: autonomy, privacy, and diversity. And you'll see how those are important and how can we apply those principles by design in a software, in a platform, to make sure that they're not only principles, but they cannot be violated because they're hard-coded in the platform. What those principles are. So the first one, we thought for a long time that patient data privacy and making discovery were opposing concepts. We think not, and this is what we're going to discuss today. We can respect patient data privacy while making discovery. The second principle is regarding diversity. So when you make a model, it's an AI model, it's really important that you get data from different sources, different equipment provider, different mode of acquisition, different treatment protocols. Otherwise, your data and your model are biased. So it's really important to capture data across multiple centers to capture that diversity. Finally, autonomy. We want to empower clinicians so they can do the discovery by themselves. And we want to empower them with AI technology. And today, AI scientists don't do AI model. They build technology that are building, with the help of artificial intelligence, automatically those models. So today, we're going to introduce you 2 concepts that were discussed today: federated learning and self-evolving AI in our platform, Imagia Evidence. And to that end, I give the talk to Lisa Di-Jorio, my colleague.
Thanks, Alex, for this introduction. So I will cover a bit more in detail the techniques that allows us to achieve privacy, or at least to address the challenge of privacy into machine learning. Roughly, we could classify them into 3 major buckets. The first one is what we call centralized learning. One very good example of it is federated learning. You might have heard about it because lately it's the one that caught the most attention from the media. Here, in a nutshell, you trust a central server to aggregate knowledge that was locally extracted. I'm going to go back to that technique in more detail within the next slide. Another set of techniques is pretty much the same mindset, except you would like to just get rid of the central server. So is there any way or any techniques that could exist, such as you can still extract your knowledge locally, so without sharing your data, and pass on the knowledge extracted? A very good example of this in the research community right now is continual learning, where the goal is really to learn new knowledge from a local data set without forgetting any other knowledge that was learned by previous part. And the last set of techniques, I would say, will tend to act a bit more on the data. So Alex showed an example of fake data, generated data. So that could be a solution where you try to extract the data distribution and attributes, generate fake patient, and contribute this patient to a central database. Other methods that are really well known within the machine learning community tend to add noise to the data to prevent individual identification while you are still able to learn the major property of this dataset. These techniques are called differential privacy. So if you want to go to the next slide, please. So how does federated learning works? Namely, you have a central server, the one that Alex is currently highlighting in gray, that will be in charge of aggregating knowledge, but not in charge of seeing or manipulating or even accessing to any data. The data will stay locally at the collaborator side. So here in this example, we have 5 different collaborators. This could be hospital or center, but they wish to collaborate and discover a joint model without sharing any data. So the server will initialize a model, send this model to every collaborator as the first part. Every collaborator will learn and train this model locally on their own dataset. So somehow they are extracting the knowledge of the dataset, and they will send it back to the central server. So here, the server will receive 5 different models. It will be in charge of aggregating them. By doing so, the local models are not that accurate as previously. So the server will send back this model toward the collaborator, who will train again, and so on. This is called a round. And the goal is to make as much round as needed until the knowledge, the training converge. So if you want to go to the next slide, thanks. Within this framework, there is different kind of scenario that could happen. The first one, that is called horizontal federated learning, is when you have different collaborators who do not share any common sample. So here the sample could be the patient. So a patient goes either to hospital A or hospital B, but not to both of them. And every center extract the exact same kind of attributes. So here we could say that both hospital A and B provide the model with CT scan and clinical information. When it's the opposite, it's called federated learning. So in that scenario, patient can go both to hospital A and hospital B, but this hospital each extract different kind of information from this patient. So for example, hospital A could still extract CT and clinical information, whereas hospital B will provide the model with genetic information. The last scenario is when you have a mix of both. So few patients are overlapping and few attributes are also overlapping. In that case, we will call it federated transfer learning, and we will rely on what we call transfer learning technique. So transfer learning is really interesting in the framework of federated learning. In a nutshell, the technique consists of training on a data set and then using the trained model on a different data set to start from the knowledge that was learned previously. We call that part fine-tuning. At Imagia, we invested a bit on this method, and we found new way to optimize this transfer learning technique. And when we applied this within the federated learning framework, we realized that they really do make a difference. So for example, what you see on the right is an example of application of transfer learning optimization at the moment of the transfer from the aggregated model toward the local model at each round. And what you can see is that the final learning is faster and on top of it, more accurate. This is the orange line, whereas the blue line is the baseline. So if you want to go to the next slide. Finally, some other way to ensure privacy by design is, as Alex mentioned, to provide the clinician with autonomy. So we will provide them with a way of creating automatically or generating automatically their model from their dataset, train locally still, and when they are happy with this model, propose to other parts to collaborate and to federate this model. So you see an example of this technique on the right. what you can see on the two architecture, the first one and the second one are human design architecture. On the third part, this is what our method will generate. So you can see that it's really different from what a human being will do. And this is this exact same model that was in that example, federated. On the bottom, we can see the result of it. And what we can see is that we still obtain a very good accuracy. The task here was a medical task, a nodule detection from CT scans. So that's it for me. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you very much, Lisa. It's a pleasure of working with you since the last 5 years. So where we are with those technology, we are currently deploying in Quebec this digital discovery platform in 5 hospitals. Currently, we've completed the deployment of this first iteration in 3 hospitals. The platform have access to 1 million patient data that is being indexed. Those patient data does not leave the hospital, and only projects that are ethically approved by ERB committees can actually do the work. But all the legal framework, all the IT framework, all the security framework have been completed out of 3 out of 5 hospitals. And of course, when those 5 hospitals will be completed, we'll be very happy. The type of data that we are accessing are on a project basis. Most of the project need images, need reports, needs demographic, and also EHR data, so diagnostic, treatment, response, and results. So anything that goes to the HL7 feed, we're able to capture. So we're essentially capturing the real world data, and what we want to accomplish with our technology is transform those real world data into real world evidence as automatically as possible in a much automated fashion. And currently we're integrating oncology, genomic, and virtual pathology data on a per project basis. We want not to remain in Quebec because Quebec wants to collaborate with other jurisdictions. So we're expanding across the country, and we're very proud to co-lead a 200 million initiative with the Terry Fox Research Institute that was launched 3 weeks ago in what we call a digital health and discovery platform, dhdp.ca. It's really a fusion of high burden disease, so of course, cancer first, and the AI communities. And as you see in the diagram, it's really a collaboration model where we have the patient in the middle that involves public and private partner, including the Mila and including Novartis, with a high focus on cancer and starting with the second disease area, neuro. So people have been talking about data trust. We think that distributed data trust is a better suitable approach because it gives the local control of what people want to do with their data, including the patients. We also want to make sure that non-AI experts can benefit from all the work of the AI institutions and also the companies such as Imagia that brings AI technology to them. Finally, we're expanding that platform, so all those researchers will be able to collaborate with other researchers and other data in the United States, starting with UPenn, and in France, starting with BioValley. And I just put some few logos here, but as you understand, the HDP is already 97 partners, including Novartis. So we really want to grow that network of partners to make sure that together we can make a difference. So that being said, the ecosystem cannot be complete without you. We really want to be part of your thought process. If you're a clinician, if you are part of a government, an hospital, an AI research institution, a pharma, a medical device, or another commercial partner that do AI, we want to partner together to make sure that this two-sided platform, the producer and the consumer, really work collaboratively together for the benefit of the patient. And now we're moving to the very interesting part. and it's a privilege to introduce the four panelists. They come, I would say, from four geographies, and they will bring four perspectives on this AI topics. We have about 25 minutes for the questions, and of course, after we'll take questions from the audience. So the first panelist is Dr. Fabrice Brunet. He's the CEO of the CHUM, which was the largest hospital in construction in North America with a budget of $3.5 billion. And in Quebec, we're very tight on budget. We made sure that the construction was on time. I think it was a great success, and you see the image on the right. Fabrice has been highly decorated, and he has received the French Legion of Honor for his career in healthcare. He's a thought leader. He implemented within the CHUM the first AI medical school in the world. And I'm very proud to say that I have co-authored with Yoshua Bengio a short AI chapter in his latest book on healthcare innovation. You see the picture on the right of the book. So I have a great admiration and friendship for Fabrice and for everything that he's doing for his 12,000 employees, and not counting all the patients that goes to CHUM. Second panelist, Paul Archevêque, has been tasked with one of the most noble initiatives, making sure that innovation will thrive in Quebec. So that's not an easy feat. He was the CEO of Genome Quebec for 8 years, so I'm sure he knows about genomics. And he has extensive experience in the private pharmaceutical sector. So I think it's really important to have both sides of the story. And from your inaugural speech as the first innovation director, I knew that the choice was the right one. We also have the privilege of having Professor Lepage, and we have deployed the platform in the CHU of Sherbrooke. So he will talk about his experience and how he sees the expansion about using techniques such as federated learning as part of the deployment. He is the co-director of the Quebec Bioimaging Network, and he will have the honor to discuss about insight that he got in his hospital. Finally, we have Professor François Laviolette. He's the founding director of the Université Laval Big Data Research Center, which bring together no less than 65 senior researchers from 6 faculties working together. He holds 2 chairs in interpretable AI. So that's a very important topic for the conversation. Of course, we want to bring AI discovery, but it's important to explain them and understand them. So I'm counting on you, François, to give a highlight on that. We met before the creation of Obvia. I'll talk briefly on that. And we're looking forward to expand our mutual collaboration. So all those 4 panelists typically do keynote speech at events. So I'm very humbled to be with you today, and we'll start with the first question. So feel free to unmute your microphone. It's an open discussion. We want to discuss on the importance of data privacy, as well as protecting the IP from an organization, whether it's a hospital or a private company. I think both are important, but we have the patient in mind. So how do we work? Paul?
Maybe I'll get started then, Alexandre. Thanks for your kind words, and I'm very pleased to participate to this panel. I think this discussion is coming at a very good time, because I think the COVID pandemic has created an environment which is a different environment, and some of the statu quo that we were relying on and almost attaching ourselves to is now moving, and we're seeing a change in attitude, and some of the issues related to privacy and to IP protection, but more around privacy, are certainly evolving. And it's not that it's not important. It's not that patient and consumers won't be at the center of that, but it is more the fact that we're starting to see the need, the absolute need to get moving on those issues. And from that standpoint, many different initiatives are happening that are providing a light at the end of the tunnel, if I can express myself like that. Some of them are known and very well recognize our ability to move towards more integration of innovations, especially on the telemedicine side and on the using information technology as well. So those are important moves. But more fundamentally, at the Ministry of Health and with colleagues from other ministries, work is happening on how do we ensure a valorization of the data. And here it's from the perspective of making sure we're extracting value from the data for all people that wants to extract value from the data. So this is a very, very fundamental and important initiative. We know that we need to do something with the with our IT park and the tools we've got available, and we're working on that as well. There's work on the legislative front, which is happening. So from all of those aspects, I think that we can see that we are very carefully looking at this issue of privacy and how do we ensure the protection of the privacy, but at the same time, how do we make data available to do research, to do management, and to do discovery in applications.
François, do you want to react to that and add the perspective of Via and yours?
Yeah, of course. I think that, Paul is right about that. I think that data privacy is something that is very, very important. And the citizen must be in the loop. We cannot do it in our isolated lab and say, well, we will do it properly. We have to be totally transparent about that, especially for I would say one big reason is the zero risk is not existing. Usually people think that if we de-anonymize the data, then there is no problem about privacy. But this is absolutely not true. We know now that we can, with the power of AI, we can do something to to get some information out of anonymized data. We can even get some information about people, specific people, just looking at a neural net that has been learned on data. So this is very important to be understood. The zero risk is not existing. On the other side, if you don't give any data to AI, you will have no result at all. So this is a very important trade-off that we have to deal with now. And this is something that is in going in the reflection of people from the government and people from the research, people from industries and so on. And I think we have to be very careful to how we do that. And for example, I think that the federated learning that has been proposed here is I think up to now the best proposition that we can have. The data is not moving from the secure place where it has been gathered, the hospital, for example. The researcher or the company do not see the data. Only the algorithm is seeing the data. And then we gather the information back. I think this is the best compromise that we can have. But again, the zero risk is not existing. We can manage to take the neural network that has been learned federated way and get some information about people. It's just much more difficult than it has than for other methods. So for that, I think, yeah, people we have to be transparent with the people, and we have to care about getting the best way of doing things. And we have to understand how to decide what is the trade-off between the importance of the discovery that we can expect if we accept that AI look at these data, and the privacy risk. And this knowledge of the trade-off is something that we still have to learn, I think.
Thank you, François, for bringing those two perspectives. And I think the patient consent is key there. I see time flying, so we're going to move to the second question. We can continue all day on this important question. the important is to move forward. I think we have a sound solution. And as you said, Francois, if the data stays where it is, it's probably the best risk that we can accept and manage.
And I have no share in Imagia.
Thank you for mentioning that. I would say nobody on the call except Lisa and I have interest in Imagia. And for people to understand, when we talk about patient data, nobody wants to have the liability of having the actual nominative information, even a pharma. We want to get the discovery. We don't want the raw data. So this is a change of mind that we're getting with the data transformation. In Quebec, we've been very good in the past in selling our natural resource. It's better to sell a finished product and a discovery. So moving to the second question, we would want to know what are the organizational barriers to enable large federated learning discovery process. So I know, for example, Martin, you've experienced the first iteration of Imagia evidence platform in your institution. So it was not set up currently to do federated learning, but let's see some of the process that you are doing if you had the capability to expand your human collaboration, because it needs to be human first. Each ethical committee from each hospitals needs to approve that, but there's probably other barriers than technical to do those large-scale discovery. So Martin, feel free to comment.
Thank you very much, Alexandre, first for inviting me to this panel and for this very relevant question. Yeah, my experience with the evidence platform was very satisfactory. Again, I'm not paid by Imagia, right? He said it, I don't have any conflict of interest. I'm just saying what I think. To me, if you want to enable collaboration, then people must be able to use the system quite easily. And what I saw is that you could browse the packs, you could select patients, you could perform analysis, you could see the results all in this particular one platform. So if that did not exist, then you would have to get the images from one software, annotate them in one software, in maybe a different software, and then aggregate this data somewhere else. And this would just be impossible to do exactly the same process at different centers. So having one piece of software that does it all, and that would be the same everywhere, would make it a lot easier for people to use and then to share the knowledge acquired through your system. Now you talk about the barriers. One of the barriers I think will be encountered quite quickly is the fact that although I fully support that you want to include diversity in your in the data, you'll get diversity, too much diversity, in the sense that you have different vendors making imaging instruments. Imaging instruments, for example, for MRI come in different versions, 1.5 Tesla, 3 Tesla, some have even 7 Tesla machines. All of these give, for the same patient, would give different images. And then there are protocols. There's a diversity of protocols that clinicians use in one or the other center that will produce images that are not exactly the same. They'll be pleasing the eye of the radiologist or the radiation oncologist or the neurologist that prescribed the exam, but they may not be exactly the same from one site to another. So when it comes to learning from these images, I've seen examples, and I'm not saying this is your case, but I'm seeing examples of AI algorithms that were extremely good at identifying from which vendors the images came, but not so much at at predicting the outcome of the patient. So this is an issue that needs to be addressed, and I know you're working on it, and it's going to be extremely important because for those MRI experts listening, a T2 weighted for me is not a T2 weighted for you, and is not the same T2 weighted for someone else. So they all look a little different, and then aggregating this knowledge might be a barrier. So I'll stop here, but I'm happy to comment further if need be.
Thank you, Martin. We briefly touched on that. This brings the importance of metadata. So when data is acquired, it's really important to have the combination of both AI scientists and medical expert, in that case, MRI expert, that can tell the AI experts, be careful, what you see in that field of DICOM will have an impact. So that dialogue is really important when building the research project. I see Francois raising his hand.
Yeah, I think that it's important that everybody look at Wikipedia on the what is fair data, right? The FAIR principle, meaning F is for findability, A is for accessibility, I is for interoperability, and R is for reusability. Okay, these principles are very the key if we want to do proper machine learning out of data. The reusability, for example, you have to think that, well, when it's time to ask for the consent, maybe it's not for only one research that or one clinical problem that we want to use the data of this person. Maybe it can be reused for other under, of course, specific circumstances that are really clearly defined. This is why I say the citizen has to be in the loop. But the fair ideas are important here. And the second point is the importance to have possibility of sharing expertise to be able to collect the data and to protect the data properly. And this is something that is in Quebec. We are thinking about that, saying that, well, there are some big hospital like the CHUM that has a lot of resources. But if you look at a small clinic, then they cannot do the same kind of thing. So if we want to have federated learning among every member of the health community, we have to think that we have to help technically the people from everywhere. So so this is two very important things, I think.
Thank you, Francois. I see question in the Q&A. One of them is about patient consents. Of course, when we do large federated learning approach, how would you do that if there's no consent? The answer is if there's no consent, you cannot work on the data. So new technology will not change the way we are typically doing things ethically. So it's really important that there's always a consent. Feel free to ask other questions in the Q&A. We'll answer them at the end, and we'll have maybe some of the questions. I will read them out loud and have the panelists answer them.
So this is so important to have a consent that, so I have consent myself. So when they want me to sign consent, I want to send a consent that my data will be used for your research, but for any other research that will come in the future. Because at least this will serve the research. And everybody in my situation is thinking exactly the same. So we have to think that consent is very important, and we should take care of that. And also there's another point that is people are not thinking of taking care of keeping the data. If you are in les services essentiels, Alexandre, les services,
essential services.
No,
emergency rooms.
Emergency room. The data from the emergency room, so a person who is in the emergency room has a lot of machine that is plugging on him, and there's a lot of data that's gathered. And now, it's 72 hours after that, they are deleting the data. And this, from the point of view of discovery through AI, this is bad news, I would say.
Better data, better discovery. That brings us to the third question. How do you see the impact of using those digital discovery, either within clinical trial, research, or clinical application? So who wants to take a stab at it? Paul?
Yeah, I can start if you want, and it will also have a link with the previous discussion we just had 1 second ago. I think it's important to marry the technology solution to the content solution, to the overall, what is the problem we're trying to solve, and how is it this will help us solve the problem. And one of the things which is happening right now is that we're moving very strongly toward to to managing healthcare trajectory, as opposed to managing episodes of care and that kind of stuff. And frankly, I think this will help the AI from different angles, because as we bring that together, there will start to emerge some consensus on what's the best approaches. And it won't be perfect, but there'll be some movement towards what is the best approach. To Martin's previous point, there will be some kind of consensus, and then we'll be able to move with that knowledge and improve that knowledge. So I think there's an incidence on that. The other thing that this is forcing us to do, I think, is to a little bit start with the end in mind. So what is the problem we're trying to solve for that health trajectory? And consequently, this will position the AI tools in a much better light to some, because there will be the full benefit of having the AI tool, but there will also be the benefit of seeing what is the potential impact on the healthcare system and on the patient. So I think those points are a little bit different maybe, but they're taking us towards convergence that needs to happen and will help AI and AI solutions that wants to get implemented.
Fabrice, I would really anxious to hear your thought as a CEO of a very large hospital. I know we're just starting, but please enlighten us.
I think there is two things that we have to consider. The first is to use artificial intelligence in solving a research question. Can you hear me? It's okay?
All good. Yep.
Okay, that's the first one. And then you can use that to define, according to your hypothesis, your question, your research question, how you can use AI as a new method of developing research. We had RCTs before, we had different kind of basic research, translational research. So it's a new way, and it has to be properly defined like real world research, and to position AI research with the other methods. The second point is AI and the data issued from AI analysis can provide us with new questions for research. And that is something that we didn't think before when we were using a research tool, which was probably developing new question according to the initial question. AI analysis of data can generate new questions that were not related to the initial question at all. Let's say you follow a patient population, and you will describe that discover with AI that some links between genomics or imaging or therapeutic response or other factors will define new knowledge and new question issued from the AI analysis. So it's not a tool to do research based on a human question by the researchers. It's generating a new question of research by artificial intelligence. If we were thinking about what we described before in terms of barriers and overcoming barriers to use artificial intelligence, we have to get the researchers prepared to the fact that they maybe will have AI-generated question and hypothesis that they were not thinking of before. So what will be the response to that? How will they manage this question generated by AI? And how will they then use AI or other form of research to validate the question asked by AI analysis? So that is something that when you use, for instance, your platform evidence, and when you look at data that are issued from different data bank or data lake, then you will see new things that will occur and will ask the researcher new questions. And that is something that we are experiencing now. You know that we have our lakes that we call Citadel, and our director of research called that citadelomic with the new generation by AI question, and then how will we implement this new question in our research protocol or strategy? That's probably one first thing that I would say answering your question.
Thank you, Fabrice. And just to emphasize on Citadel, we always think, oh, in the hospital, they have 50 systems, maybe 100 systems. At CHIM, I think you have 309 systems. So the work of Citadel to aggregate some of those data was paramount and very important. Same work that they are doing at CHUC. So when you want to do artificial intelligence, it's not magic. You need also to get organized internally. So those are key initiatives. I see one question relevant in the Q&A regarding those discoveries. What do you do with them? So some of those discovery will be on the regulated path. Some others won't be. It really depends on what you want to do with them. That could be a full topic, but Health Canada was really helpful and have actually done a consultation in revising their medical device as a software class to get input from artificial intelligence company. So I think we're in a good hands in Canada, making sure that we can bring those discoveries in various flavors. Last intervention on this question before we move to the last one, François.
Okay, I think you are exactly the subject of our research is about interpretability in AI, and of course there are two reasons why interpretability is important in healthcare. The first one is if you want to have AI in the medicine, precision medicine, then the AI system has to explain to the specialist why he proposed pills blue instead of pills green. This is the first thing that is obvious. But also in the research part, interpretability is so important because AI is looking for correlation. We try to go to causality, but it's a much more difficult way to do that. So we infer a hypothesis from the data. So it's exactly the converse as what is usually science. We start from the data and we infer a hypothesis. Normally, research is doing exactly the converse, right? And so when we look at the data, we need to see where are the correlation, and we need to be able to explain it to the researcher. Say, well, I think that this mutation at this gene has an important role for this phenotype. Is it known? And then the specialists will say, yes, we know that since 20 years because we have, or they will say, whoa, we don't know. And when AI is finding such an hypothesis that is not known, there are two possibilities. The AI may be not correct. It can do errors, or is going to in a direction to have a new finding, a new discovery in that direction. And this back and forth between research in medicine and AI is one of the reasons why I think that medicine of precision medicine will be the next very important breakthrough of AI. We have the autonomous car, we have the image recognition, we have the understanding of natural language. I think the next step of a big exploit that we'll see of AI will be in medicine precision for that reason.
And that ties into the treatment response. Some patients will respond very well to some type of treatment. If you have a 30% response rate on a treatment, you want to know, are you going to respond to that treatment or you're better on the second one? I experienced this myself firsthand, and it's always a tough choice when you don't know the outcome. There's also a question on the Q&A regarding digital discoveries. So where the data comes from, if you have very old data, but you have a lot of them, is that relevant? whether or not you have consent. So I already answered the question of consent. I would say typically we want recent data because working on data that date 15 years or even older than 10 years, equipment change, treatment change. So it's important to have a variability in the duration of your data because you want to follow the progressions of the disease and how the patient evolve. But sometimes having data 40 years old is, of course, less relevant than current data. So that's just a small clarification.
If I may just add a very, very brief comment in response to what we would do with digital discoveries. As a researcher, I can tell you we would embrace it. And we already are basing a lot of our hypotheses based on previous projects that we're doing as we plan to do it. And then along the way, we go, what is this? What is that? And then this triggers on new research projects. So we're already influenced by the data we get. So I can certainly foresee that we will embrace insight that will be provided from discoveries from AI.
Thank you, Martin. For the last question, and we'll leave a few minutes for the last Q&A on the chat. Always, what are the most pressing needs? Where do you see AI discovery could be applied and have big impact? We don't know when they come. There's already some AI discoveries in the market, but I really want to hear you, maybe starting by Fabrice.
I think there is, this is a very important question, Alexandre. The problem is we have so many fields of application of artificial intelligence data analysis or artificial intelligence decision-making help that it's very difficult to prioritize. I would say we have two different fields. The first one is what François called before precision medicine or individualized medicine, in which you can use data and the result of the data analysis with your machine learning training, as you said before, to better treat a given patient or a isolated or identified group of patients. So I think this is a very rich environment in which you can get a lot of application of AI tools to better treat, better diagnose, and follow up the patients. The second part is much more related to the health of the individual or the population. And if you are looking at this second field, it's huge. It's almost without any barriers because it's the sum of personal, I mean, genomics and individual-based prognosis and health determinants, plus all the environmental factors. And we see that with the COVID, for instance, today, with the pandemic, we see that our major concern is to keep our population safe and healthy according to their susceptibility, individual susceptibility, but also the environmental factors. We have developed different tools to see the influence of socioeconomic factors, where the people live, what is their habits in terms of socialization and all of these factors that will increase the risk. So in that case, AI could be extremely useful because we will have more and more data to deal with and to make the decision based on a huge amount of data, maybe full data that are much more than in precision medicine, in which we can focus on the disease and the treatment, and that will also be much more important when you have this health approach and not the disease approach, in terms of what we discussed in your first question, which is confidentiality, privacy, because you are not leading with the patient, we are in fact not leading, but dealing with citizens that are healthy and that you want to keep healthy. So in that case, what is privacy, confidentiality, personal rights, democracy is completely different as if you speak about precision medicine, in which the patients need to have more and more information about the way to be diagnosed, prognosed, and treated. And if you look at all the surveys that have been made, the patients are much more in agreement with using AI than the citizens.
Thank you,
yeah, that's
Fabrice.
true. But this is something that I think needs some debate in the society. But yeah, in a research we call it the exposome, instead of it simply regarding, for example, the genome of the person or the clinical data. We look at everything that happened to the citizen. So this means, for example, that we have a Fitbit watch, and so we take all these data together, and we use the fact that AI is good at taking heterogeneous data that are very unstructured, like sensors data, and combined with natural language data, such as a report or an email, combined with genomic data, combined with whatever, right? AI is very good to combine everything on that. And so if we can have access to a lot of such information for a lot of citizens, then we will be able to help people to preserve their health. But I think we are not there yet,
No,
because of the privacy problem that you said. But this is something I hope will be the next step.
There's an interesting question in the Q&A from Joseph Viviano. I will read it out loud, and I think, François, you could provide some insight. What do the end user, the physician, consider sufficient model interpretability for regulatory approval? It is an open debate on a medical side. What constitutes an interpretable model? So certainly on the regulatory, there's clinical trial, digital discovery will follow the same path. So no product will see the light that has not been approved if it's on the regulatory path. But I want to have your thought process, François, on what constitutes a sufficient interpretable model.
Yeah, first thing first, I don't believe, even if it's my job to work on that, I don't believe that each possible AI will be one day interpretable. Some tasks need a very, very complicated deep learning network on which we will barely be able to give good insight. And so interpretability is not defined properly yet. We know that we have achieved some interpretability level when we achieve it. And there is some metric now that we are trying to define in this direction and stuff like that. But at the moment, there is no way to say that an AI is interpretable enough to be certified by the authorities. We have the same problem with airplanes, for example.
We'll leave the question, can an AI certify another AI model, for the next presentation, François? But I think that's a very interesting panel. I see a lot of unanswered questions in the Q&A. For those of you that have the Q&A, I'll stay later and answer some of those on the chat. I really want to thank all the panelists, François, Martin, Paul, Fabrice. I think we could have continued the discussion for another hour. And I think together we are making a difference. So thanks, Fabrice, for supporting our deployment at CHUM, Martin for supporting our deployment at CHUS, and François for supporting our deployment in CHUC, and Paul hopefully to initiate that innovation movement that you've started not that long ago, but times fly. And Lisa, it's always a pleasure to work with you since the last 5 years. So we'll conclude this session. And again, thanks to our host, Novartis and Mila.
Thank you,
Thank you, Alexandre.
Merci, Alexandre.
Merci.
C'est très agréable.
Toujours. We'll look at the Q&A. There are still people on the call.
Okay, so regarding the agreement to onboard various collaborators and manage their numerous requirements, maybe
Yeah,
I'll let you go, Alex.
So the question came from Anne McDowell. So the agreement that we make with the hospitals it's a master agreement, and we want to make sure that each project is well represented, but it's an iterative project process. So let's say the first project that is onboarded require images and reports. So this is what is typically get integrated as part of the integration. If there's another project that require genomic data at a panel level, that's the next thing that's going to be integrated. So we never integrated the 300 system at once, unless you have something like a data lake, for example, that you have at CHUM. So the advantage of having such an agreement with the institution, everything goes by amendment, and you don't need to revisit the whole strategy every time you add another project. So that was the question from Anne McDowell. The question from Joseph, I think Francois provided a nice explanation. We already have a question regarding old data. So I answered that live. I think we need to emphasize on the type of data that we're getting as well. It's important to get data that are consumed by human, but sometimes we lack the raw data that produce those, I would say, filter data. So we're not there yet, but it's really important to keep that in mind, that a lot of equipment generate raw data that we never see. And of course, there's more signal in those raw data. Then there's another question on ethics about patient decision. Can a patient can consent this, can consent that? There's an important concept of patient withdrawal consent. So a patient can change their mind. If they're not happy about the decision they've made in the past, they can withdraw their consent. And that's a very important piece of the puzzle that you want to maintain at all time. And this is called traceability. We want to make sure that we maintain data traceability at all time. So if a patient revokes its consent, we can remove the data from the research environment, but also remove a model that would have learned from that specific data and retrain it live. Of course, when the model is in the market, like a pill, the consent cannot be withdrawn for this specific commercial outcome, but it will be effective for any new research. So I would argue that traceability can be as important or even more important than confidentiality. So thank you, Lisa. We'll close the session now. Thank you, everyone, for attending.
Thanks a lot, Alexandre. Thanks, everyone. Bye.